Hello, and welcome to my Dead Man Switch. I'm just kidding. Kind of. Things have gotten a little bit hot over the past few weeks, and it's come to my attention that there are some really bad people out there who really don't like me. And it would be a shame if something happened to me before I could tell my story about how I stumbled onto a very real satanic pedophile cult known as 764. But first, if you haven't already watched my Where is Jade Parker video, that's a really good place to start. In fact, you need to start there. I made that video back in January as I was wrapping up my investigation into the accelerationist forces that I believed may be provoking mass shootings in specific online communities. To give you a super short TLDR of the Where is Jade video, it explains how I was researching the true cause behind mass shootings when I stumbled upon a major rabbit hole, leading me to a number of online extremist communities that had been infiltrated by a rising terror threat known as accelerationism. And before you start typing angry comments at me, no, we aren't talking about the e-acceleration tech bro stuff. The type of acceleration we're talking about here is a form of violent extremism that works to pit the people of America and their respective political ideologies against each other in an attempt to spread chaos and accelerate societal collapse. Of course, this tactic of division, which is reminiscent of the Operation Gladio era strategy of tension, is already widely used by far greater threats than fringe accelerationist domestic terror cells. But these domestic terror cells have been growing bigger and stronger and getting better at what they do. So, in my opinion, they're worth more than just a fleeting mention in an occasional news story. Jade Parker was a counterterrorism researcher who formerly worked in military intelligence. After doing a lot of research and blowing the whistle on the emerging accelerationist terror threat and trying desperately to get her higher-ups to pay attention to it, she was smeared and ousted from her field by gatekeeping colleagues. She took to Twitter to air her grievances, and she shared a document she called her Dead Man Switch, and she claimed to have used her research to determine the identity of the person who planted the bomb on Capitol Hill on January 5th, the day before the January 6th Capitol riot. Then shortly after that, Jade went dark. Short side note to let y'all know that Jade Parker is alive. I won't go into too many details, but just so you know, she is alive, she's in hiding, and she has a really good reason for wanting to stay that way. One of the accelerationist groups that Jade worked to expose is an obscure satanic neo-Nazi cult called the Order of Nine Angles. And in this video, I'm going to break down that cult's relationship to the satanic pedophilia network 764. Back in January of 2024, the world had become aware of Kyle Spitz after a viral video began circulating on the platform formerly known as Twitter, which I still call Twitter out of sheer stubbornness. In the video, Kyle lay on his bed, a laptop in his lap, when an unkempt middle-aged man lunged into the open doorway.
Get ready, boys. Goddamn brains out right fucking now.
Stop it!
Blow my brains out.
No! Stop it! Stop it!
Sue me, I guarantee you'll go to jail for life.
I'm tired of shit.
You're gonna blow my
How
mom?
are you
You're
doing
gonna
this?
blow my mom's brains out? Point that gun at me again.
You just fucking hit me? Did he hit you? Oh my god! You're going...
It was a simple 54-second video, offered by many large accounts on Twitter with no context. Salty Cracker, a large YouTube channel, featured a breakdown of the video which was aptly titled, "Family that looks like a bunch of meth addicts shoot each other."
Everybody in this household, except for that dog, is fucking stupid. Blammo! Holy shit!
The sudden virality of this short, out-of-context video made sense. It was the perfect length. There was a lot going on. Kyle's provocation of a deranged gunman, leading him to get grazed in the ear by a bullet, the mother with her pants down at her ankles, the all-too-perfect freeze frame of the bullet leaving the barrel, and the blood drops on the floor. But most importantly, the group of influencers who shared it on Twitter and their followers had no shortage of funny comments and memes to make about the situation. Law and Crime Sidebar host Jesse Weber was quick to secure an interview with Kyle Spitz, where he revealed that the shooter was his stepdad, 68-year-old Jeffrey Scott West. After the video ended, the Blount County SWAT team was deployed and a standoff ensued, ultimately ending when West committed suicide inside the house.
We are joined right now by Kyle Spitz himself. Kyle, thank you so much for coming on here, and very nice to meet you. I know this isn't an easy thing to talk about, so I appreciate you being generous with your time, generous with talking about what happened. I actually just want to ask, How are you doing? As of right now, today, how are you doing?
I'm thriving actually right now. Life is doing me great. I haven't had anything serious come from it, from the event, so I mean, honestly, I just had stitches in my ear, and I moved on. After 2 weeks, they took them out, and then it was just back to life.
Kyle Spitz and his mother Melanie escaped the situation relatively unscathed. When I first saw the video, I went to the comments section, saw that the videographer hadn't been killed, and chuckled to myself about the absurdity of the scene. Then I scrolled on to the next post in my feed and mostly forgot about it. But a little later, I saw the same post shared again, and I went back to the comments. This time I saw one that made me do a double take. Kyle isn't a victim. He's a satanic child groomer who gets little girls to cut themselves on camera. Well, a link to a satanic pedophile cult was certainly not the outcome I was expecting here. But it just so happens that for several months prior, my small independent research team and I had been closely following news of a fringe online community known as 764. This group, which could accurately be characterized as a cult, consisted of pseudo-satanic predators who groomed kids they found online into committing sadistic acts of self-harm, animal abuse, and even suicide on camera. The videos were used to extort their young victims into producing increasingly more extreme content. It may start with a nude photo or a sexual act that the underage victim sends to the abuser. The abusers then extort the victim into committing increasingly evil acts. They'd order them to cut their abuser's name into their bodies, a sign of ownership known as a cut sign. They would order them to slaughter their house pets under the threat of murdering their entire families if they refused to comply. They would get the young victims on live Discord calls and give them instructions on how to find the most lethal combination of pills from their parents' medicine cabinets. These predators find their child victims in places most parents believe are safe online spaces for kids. They lure them from gaming platforms like Minecraft and Roblox and messaging platforms like Discord. They even utilize social media platforms like Twitter and Instagram, utilizing hashtags adopted by niche communities dedicated to self-harm and eating disorders. These communities serve as rich victim pools where predators hunt for kids that are already vulnerable in order to further exploit them. 764 is only one such group in a sprawling network of interrelated communities known as COM. When placed on a mind map, COM looks more like an octopus than an organized network of splinter cells, with tentacles that encompass a wide range of cybercriminal activity. There's Hacking COM, full of script kiddies willing to dox, swat, and commit other cybercrimes for money. They may, for example, call in a bomb threat to a school for a disgruntled student who was able to pay them. There's also an animal abuse side of COM. And then there's Extortion COM, which relies on the hackers and overlaps with 764, whose members hack and extort their victims in order to fulfill their motives. COM also has significant overlap with domestic terror cells. These individuals congregate on Terrorgram, the network of Telegram channels comprised of violent extremists that range from white nationalists to satanic neo-Nazis. A recent Wired article analyzed more than 3 million messages from 50 chat groups in the COM network, revealing thousands of users in nearly a dozen countries involved in various COM subgroups. They note that such groups have been growing rapidly since their widespread emergence in 2022, when only a handful of cases had been analyzed by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We were all too aware of this group. Even before the FBI released their September 2023 bulletin warning parents about the network known as 764, we had stumbled across some of these communities. A Discord server full of gaping wounds, disemboweled animals, and satanic sigils crudely drawn in blood were all telltale signs of 764 influence. And even before the FBI acknowledged the group, there had been arrests, the most public being that of Angel Almeida of New York. Almeida, who went by the nickname Duck, was arrested in connection with a gun crime, which led investigators to unearth a horde of child pornography and terrorist literature, which connected him to the satanic neo-Nazi extremist group called the Order of Nine Angles. Because of my ongoing research into accelerationism, I already had Order of Nine Angles on my radar at this time, and had begun tracking mentions of 764 on social media after the FBI press release in 2023. For this reason, I became aware of a number of alleged victims of Kyle Spitz, who were attempting to get attention in the wake of the video. The victims alleged that Kyle Spitz was a member of 764 and that he had groomed and extorted numerous individuals, including minors, into self-harm and sexual exploitation. The victims stated they were already in contact with police and that an investigation investigation was underway. Approximately 2 weeks later, on January 31st, 2024, I was contacted by an anonymous source who stated that Kyle Spitz's mom, Melanie Spitz, had died, and that Kyle had posted disturbing videos in his Telegram group of the incident. In the source's opinion, the Telegram post indicated that Kyle Spitz had murdered his mother. The source additionally claimed to have evidence that Spitz had been extorting women to cut themselves since 2016, and that he was in possession of a large quantity of child pornography. The video Spitz had posted to his Telegram channel was disturbing, to say the least. In it, he stands over his dead mother's body while she lies on her back. Her hair seems to have been deliberately swept over her face. There appears to be blood on the face underneath her hair. The body appears to have been moved from the bed to the ground, and the bed has a large, human-shaped stain of what appears to be fresh blood. The bed sheets are crumpled up and soaked in blood. On the floor next to Melanie Spitz's body is a Narcan inhaler, which contains a medication used to treat opioid overdoses. At times, in between sobs, it sounds as if Kyle's stifling maniacal laughter, and at one point he appears to grope his dead mother's breasts. Kyle holds up his blood-soaked hand, revealing a bracelet which matches the one in a recent Instagram post on an account known to belong to him, which helped confirm his identity. What I saw appeared to be the aftermath of a murder. So, after I confirmed the evidence to be credible, I contacted the authorities in order to share the evidence with law enforcement. At that time, the agent told me that he had spoken with the Friendsville, Tennessee police and confirmed Melanie Spitz was deceased. He also elaborated that the cause of death was suicide. I found it unusual that police would convey this information prior to completing the investigation into her death. They also said that they were aware of Kyle's online activities, that he had posted a picture of Melanie Spitz's dead body on Instagram, and they acknowledged that it was a strange thing to do. That's the last I would hear from authorities on the matter. Melanie's cause of death was eventually revealed to be a lethal dose of fentanyl. The massive, unsurvivable quantity of blood, they told us, came from a ruptured esophagus, the consequence of years of alcoholism. With the police informed and Melanie Spitz's death confirmed, I made a post on X at the request of the victims, who were desperate to get eyes on the situation. The next day, as the tweet continued to garner attention, I began to receive threats from accounts associated with 764. An individual with the moniker Acid sent threats to me on Twitter in an attempt to prevent me from talking about Kyle and his mother publicly. Acid's bio read, 764, DM me to join Hellroom. Hellroom, as I would soon learn, was the name of a common 764 Telegram channel used to post the sickening content created by the group. Acid also warned me that I was in the process of being EDR'd. EDR stands for Emergency Data Request, a procedure used by U.S. law enforcement agencies for obtaining information from service providers in emergency situations where there isn't time to get a subpoena. In 2022, Brian Krebs reported that emergency data requests were being spoofed by hackers to obtain confidential information. I would later receive confirmation from the police that this is a very real swatting tactic being employed by a network of cybercriminals associated with COM to dox, SWAT, and otherwise harass victims, as well as journalists and others working to expose the group. My team and I were able to assist some minor victims of the group who reached out to me after seeing my tweets about 764. One of these brave victims was pivotal in securing the arrest of her abuser, Kyle Spitz. Though I'll admit to having a grudge against the FBI, the experience did show me that there are some well-intentioned people still working at the Bureau, at least within the pitifully underfunded child crime units. After the Kyle Spitz arrest, I made the decision to continue my pro bono research and report on these groups publicly, despite the risks that such work entailed. Kyle Spitz, who used the online pseudonym Criminal, was arrested on federal child exploitation charges on February 22, 2024. He later pled not guilty to a litany of grotesque charges, including distribution of animal-crushing videos, in addition to child exploitation and child pornography production and distribution. About a month later, as investigators continued to unravel the sordid 764 members and identify key members, Acid was also arrested. He was an 18-year-old from West Sussex, UK, named Cameron Finnegan. Finnegan, who was online friends with Kyle Spitz, had continually threatened me and my family over my reporting on the 764 network. And when the cops found him, he had been plotting to murder a homeless man in his town. He's since been charged with 1 count of preparation of terrorist acts, 1 count of possessing a terrorist document, and 1 count of possessing indecent images of a child. My small research team and I hit the ground running as soon as the Kyle Spitz story appeared on our radar. And again, 764 was already on our radar due to its intersection with the Satanic accelerationist group Order of Nine Angles. While investigating the 764 network, I encountered the most horrific, unimaginable, and disgusting content I've ever seen in my life. These child predators groom children they find online into committing all sorts of awful acts for their own sick pleasure. But our investigation quickly began to uncover that 764 and related groups were about much more than just crimes against children. They were rooted in accelerationism. The Order of Nine Angles is a classic accelerationist group assembled many decades ago. According to most accounts, it was brought about in the 80s by a National Socialist fanaticist named David Myatt. On the surface, O9A is overtly satanic and built around an apocalyptic death cult ideology. Dozens of official texts have been published, many detailing sinister left-hand path rituals that include human sacrifice. But if you peel back the layers of elaborate mythos, which is mired with puzzles, conflicting messages, and cleverly designed tests, you will reveal an elaborate, sinister ruse, seemingly designed by Myatt in an attempt to infiltrate institutions and sway the political landscape in favor of his beloved National Socialism. O9A adherents are best known for their discreet infiltration of fringe communities, a tactic that they call insight rolls. O9A members are instructed to join the groups and rise up in the ranks, ultimately using their status to provoke them to violence or to further anti-Western political goals. 764 appears to be yet another example of accelerationist infiltration by these groups. O9A related Twitter accounts have been seen arguing that the members of 764 are opfers, the O9A term for a human sacrifice, wherein an individual of poor character is selected and used to commit sinister acts on behalf of the cult by proxy. In addition to encouraging child predators to incorporate elements of Satanism and the occult into their abuse, these accelerationists also attempt to provoke both the predators and their victims to commit acts of domestic terrorism, most notably mass shootings and other politically motivated violence. Their ultimate goal is to hasten the collapse of Western society. Today, O9A adherents swim like sharks throughout Com and Telegram, hunting for vulnerable individuals they can groom into committing acts of violence and distributing O9A literature. O9A adherents are especially notorious for spreading child and animal abuse content, which is used to groom and desensitize their young targets. An O9A-linked precursor group to 764 called CVLT was connected to at least one highly publicized mass shooting, the one perpetrated by Peyton Gendron at the Tops grocery store in Buffalo, New York. Gendron, who live-streamed himself murdering innocent black shoppers before being apprehended, had online contact with a couple of shadowy provocateurs in the weeks preceding the attack. One of them, who he called Sandman, gave him advice ranging from what type of gun parts and gear to buy to how to plan the timing of his attack so that he wouldn't go to jail. Sandman also indoctrinated Gendron with National Socialist ideologies. We now have evidence that Gendron was present in these CVLT Discord servers, where he went by the username Nexum. Regardless of this bombshell information, there were no mentions of Sandman or of Gendron's radicalization in the mainstream news coverage of this tragedy. It's worth pointing out that these child extortion groups have been around longer than the last couple of years, when mainstream began taking notice. Com groups started to form over a decade ago as offshoots of communities related to Minecraft and other online platforms targeted at kids. But only in the past couple of years have the satanic elements begun to peek through. Before 764 reared its ugly head, CVLT preyed on kids in a similarly evil fashion. A 21-year-old member of CVLT named Caleb Merritt was arrested in 2021 for grooming, sexually exploiting, and eventually kidnapping a 12-year-old girl from Virginia. He was later sentenced to 350 years in prison. Merritt is also believed to have been affiliated with the Order of Nine Angles. Although the origins and etymology of 764 are hotly disputed by current and former members, most evidence indicates that the group was started by a 17-year-old named Bradley Cadenhead, who took inspiration from CVLT. Some rumors claim that Cadenhead was groomed by an individual on Minecraft into linking 764 with O9A ideology. Cadenhead was eventually arrested and given a hefty 80-year sentence. In an interview with Beneath the Surface News, the officer in charge of the investigation into Cadenhead stated, "To be perfectly honest, the child pornography is probably the least egregious crime he committed. He is a scary kid. His whole thing is about online manipulation." Other members have also incorporated similar occultist aesthetics and rituals into their abuse. It's rumored that Angel Almeida, a notorious 764 member associated with the O9A chapter Temple of Blood, seeded O9A ideologies into 764 and related communities by starting his own chapter within Com. Almeida is said to have extorted girls as a form of sacrifice to an Islamic demon called Shaitan. 47-year-old Richard Densmore, who went by the name Rabbit, ran a Discord server rife with abuse and illegal content, which he called Sewer. A leaked conversation excerpt showed Densmore expressing interest in forming a satanic blood cult.
I have little children cut themselves for me and do weird shit. And, I might have people, strangle themselves with a fucking cable or kill their pets or just do weird shit. And I record it. Or have other people record it. And then, I'm part of a cult, a really bad people cult.
Once Kyle Spitz and Cameron Finnegan were in jail and the immediate threats to my life stopped, I recentered my focus onto the bigger picture. After all, I'm always the first to criticize federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies for targeting the targets instead of the actual terrorists. I began to seek out more conclusive information about who was driving these occultist and accelerationist ideologies into 764 and other comm groups. Some researchers believe that the satanic elements are being pushed by people much higher in the group, who would encourage lower-ranking members to embrace Satanism and send them occult materials to study, while instructing them to incorporate the symbolism into their extortion activities. The outputs of such indoctrination are child abuse and self-harm content rife with jarring satanic imagery. Among the occult symbols seen in these images are the pentagram, Leviathan's cross or Satan's cross, the upside-down cross, the sigil of Baphomet, and the svastika, which is a backward swastika common to the worship of Kali, a Hindu goddess commonly co-opted into various neo-Nazi ideologies. These symbols are borrowed from a multitude of satanic disciplines, including from Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, a mild, politically correct brand of Satanism adamant in their efforts to reduce the negative stigma towards Satanism as a whole. The satanic elements of the 764 story led many to doubt its legitimacy. Church of Satan adherents, and even at one point the Church of Satan official Twitter page, came out of the woodworks to contest their affiliation with such debauchery. In addition, normal people who've been blinded by their bias against the satanic panic also dismissed early reports on 764 as being conspiracy theories. The satanic panic had the ultimate consequence of discrediting all things associated with Satanism, a sort of poison dagger. Consequently, people are less likely to listen to victims and advocates because any mention of Satanism naturally increases skepticism around even factual matters. It's even possible that this association could be intentionally seeded into a group with the explicit intent of making the victims sound crazy. At the same time, it would be inappropriate to omit these details when reporting on the 764 network. The satanic and occultist elements act as a distinct calling card, an important aid to help parents and law enforcement identify the group. It's imperative to identify the higher-ranking members of this group in order to end the cycle of abuse. Many of the more prolific 764 members are also victims of grooming and extortion. This perpetual cycle of trauma will continue, with even the youngest victims facing a higher lifetime risk of becoming an abuser themselves. Until they're stopped, these higher-up predators will continue to find victims to exploit and indoctrinate into harming themselves and other children. That's certainly not meant to detract from the committed law enforcement efforts to put egregious offenders like Kyle Spitz, Richard Densmore, Cameron Finnegan, and others behind bars. While these men may have been the victims of grooming in their own right, they still pose a significant risk to society. But tackling this issue is a lot like tackling a widespread fire. In order to quench the flames, we must first seek out and shut off the ignition source, or new fires will continuously emerge as we put them out. So in the same sense, arresting the higher-ranking members of these groups has to remain a priority. And so my investigations continued, and as I began to unravel this dark network of cybercriminals, more faces began to emerge as key players within the 764 and comm communities. Some were foreign, like the leader of the Ukraine-based satanic neo-Nazi group MKU. Others, like the Texas-based 098 splinter group Satanic Front, were closer to home. And there's another, even more insidious network of individuals who are, quite possibly, close enough to be your mutuals on Twitter.
You're going to get penetrated by demons. You're going to get penetrated by demons.